Hi everyone, it's Amy here from the blog I Think Therefore I Teach. In today's Mark With Me, I'm going to be looking at an answer from last year's Philosophy of Religion paper. The question was, assess Boethius' view that divine eternity does not limit human free will. So, let's have a look at a student's answer. This student got an A-star overall for this paper. So let's have a look what they wrote. Christianity has long been fueled in parts by the idea of predestination. In the Bible, we read, "In love he predestined us," Leviticus. However, it has often been said that this view restricts or deletes human free will, and so new ideas arose. Boethius' view on divine eternity attempts to solve this issue while preserving an eternal and everlasting God, although it is down to debate as to whether this problem can be solved at all. So within this introduction, it's very effective. It's nice and short. You've got your quote in there. You've got your link back to the question. You've also got that critical tone being established, that there's a debate around whether it can be solved at all. So let's have a look what he answers. Boethius' primary and central view on divine eternity is that God views time altogether as one whole. He believes that God must be eternal since he is omnipresent, but human beings must also have free will since it is in God's creation of us. Boethius claimed that in order to preserve free will, God views time as an amalgam, where past, present and future are all seen simultaneously. He devised this view in response to predestination, which is John Calvin's idea that all actions have been determined before creation and therefore so has all divine judgment. Boethius found this unjust, since if all decisions were fixed from the beginning, then divine reward and divine punishment would be unfair. Boethius' view is extremely effective. God's eternity is given in Christian thought, eternal law, and if God's perception of time was linear like our own, and if he had predestined us, then judgment would be adequately unjust. Furthermore, if God viewed all of time as one whole, then he would be partially inexcusable from evil, since he would not identify when an event happened. However, so what we have here is a link to John Calvin's views of predestination. I might want to make it a bit clearer that Boethius came a long time before John Calvin. That's not quite clear here, but again, certain things don't have to be spelt out in an exam, but I think it's important just to recognise that. So Boethius tried to avoid predestination, which was taken by John Calvin, and this idea of just judgment and reward and punishment do not work because the path is set, the actions are set, and therefore it would be unfair. So this is nicely developed, linked back, always keeping with the focus of Boethius, and then how Boethius is effective because these ideas of God needing to be eternal, how God's ideas are different from our understandings of linearity, and then therefore how he has to view time as a whole. So this also means that he's excusable in part from evil because he's not part of time, he's not part of linear time that humans experience. So this is nicely explained and justified from this student. You have the evaluation on the line of argument running throughout. You've got the justification, and then you've got the evaluation there with the idea of effective, and then why it is effective with this build upon arguments here. We then come into the however, so you know a criticism is being raised here. So it's from here that you'll see whether the student is going to argue Boethius does not work overall or whether his argument can be defended. But let's see what the weakness is. However, in the question of human free will, Boethius' idea is presented far weaker. If Boethius' view of a timeless God were true, it would not allow us any more free will and predestination, since if past, present and future are amalgamated, then there is movement in time, movement to time. And while there is no movement in time, there can equally be no free will, since each event is destined to happen no matter what, regardless of how God sees it. So this is the idea where the student is linking Boethius' views to predestination, saying how do we really have free will? Even if God doesn't see it as linear, they're still together. So there's still an amalgamation of past, present, future together. So while there's not a movement from past to present to future, there's still movement within that whole. And therefore he's questioning, is there free will? If the future already exists, since God can see it, then all future events have categorically be predetermined. In order for free will to be fully unlimited, the future would have to be non-existent until it becomes the present. Otherwise, our actions are simply events waiting to happen. Thus, Boethius' view does not prevent the limitation of human free will. So he's bringing all of this back to the argument now, and he's made it clear that actually this isn't defensible. He can't find a defence for this, so he's presented this, however, and then really said how actually there is no way around this, that Boethius' view is too much like predetermination. Therefore, going back to the question of Boethius' view does not limit, he is arguing it does limit free will. And then he gives an alternative. An alternative to Boethius' belief is the everlasting school of thought, which more accurately depicts a situation under which human free will and divine eternity can exist. Peter Vardy, an English theologian, claims that God's omniscience and eternity only extends to that which exists presently. Vardy argues that God cannot defy natural truths such as the passage of time, as this would limit human free will, and since the future categorically does not yet exist, it is impossible for God to know any of our future actions. This theme can also be seen in J.L. Mackie's view that logical impossibilities do not exist. In comparison to Boethius' idea, this idea of everlasting is far more logical and far more sensible. I'll just stop there for a second. What you have here is very sophisticated. He's brought in Vardy as an opposing view. He's cited to outline why Vardy's view works better because the future categorically is not known. He's then made a link to J.L. Mackie's logical impossibilities from the omnipotence section, but very subtly and very nicely dropped it in there as part of his argument, and then he's brought it back to Boethius. This bit is absolutely essential. The question asks for Boethius. So if that bit wasn't done, this whole paragraph then isn't relevant. It's about always linking your points back to the question you've been asked. So because the question was on Boethius, he's then linked it back to Boethius here. So in comparison to Boethius' idea, this idea of everlasting is far more logical and far more sensible. So I would be assuming now that he would go on to explain deeper and further why. If God produced humans at all as free agents, then why would he disallow our freedom via an aspect of his core nature? Furthermore, as Swinburne argues, if Boethius' view was true, it would be insurmountably difficult for God to distinguish any of it enough to pass judgment. However, so let's again pause here. What you have here is you have a justification as to why Vardy's view works with the rhetorical question of why would God make us free agents but then not allow us to have freedom? He then brings in Swinburne, and Swinburne's idea, and we know Swinburne goes against Boethius, so they've got a direct link once again to the question. And what he's arguing is that if Boethius is God's view on time, God knows all events, so past, present, future together as a whole, that it's insurmountably difficult and to distinguish any parts of this to then deserve judgment. So what he's actually arguing is that it doesn't make sense, because if God does see past, present, future together, that it's still hard to judge because you can't actually distinguish the different parts. So, however, while the everlasting view is strong, it goes directly against the core teachings of the church. So he said why Swinburne and Vardy's views is better than Boethius's, but then he's going to start exploring some of the problems with this idea. So let's see where it goes now. However, while the everlasting view is strong, it goes directly against the core teachings of the church and Bible, meaning the idea in itself has only a dubious connection to the Christian God at all, and therefore could be applied to any theocentric belief system. However, This criticism surely matters little in this debate, since God's nature is mysterious by definition. Overall, the everlasting belief is far more structurally sound in comparison to Boethius' idea when it comes to human free will. So what the student's done is he's raised a problem with the perspective of Vardy and Swinburne by saying that it doesn't match up with all of God's attributes, such as things like omniscience, because he doesn't know the future. But then he's said that this is a small problem in the bigger picture, because actually God's nature is mysterious to us, and therefore it's still a better approach than Boethius's. So to conclude, Boethius's view that divine eternity does not limit free will is weak, since Boethius's views on eternity alone are intrinsically and tangibly flawed. While the belief permits divine foreknowledge and predestination, the quasi-free will claim that comes with his belief is incongruous with the remainder of his beliefs, and therefore is a baseless argument on divine eternity, especially on the question of free will. Very, very nice conclusion here. Linked back to the question throughout, very clear that he's arguing that overall Boethius' view is weak. Why? Weak and flawed. Why? Because the ideas of this pseudo quasi free will, the free will just doesn't work with the idea of God knowing past, present and future together, God having this foreknowledge. It just doesn't work together. So they are incongruous, they do not link, and therefore, because you cannot have divine eternity and free will together, it then questions how well Boethius' argument works. And so going back to the question of Boethius' view that divine eternity does not limit human free will, the student is arguing it does limit human free will, because you cannot have divine eternity and free will together. They do not go, and therefore, because Boethius tries but isn't successful, his argument overall is flawed and weak. As you can see, the student got 15 out of 16 for AO1. That's the explanation, the detail, the description, the names, the comparisons. The 23 out of 24 was for the evaluation, that line of argument throughout, that use of critical words, that justification and judgment that's been made. Hopefully you've found this mark with me useful. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment underneath. Otherwise, go across to the blog where you'll get more tips on how to write essays and exam technique. Please also subscribe, because this will keep you up to date with the latest mark with me. I hope to do another one very, very soon. Thanks very much, everyone. I hope your revision is going really, really well. See you next time. Bye.